She shreds too.
Welcome, Maddie. Sorry.
Okay, I can't play anymore. I'm Mike Drake, and it's all my fault.
It is all his fault.
I have a little bit of experience at both places.
A tiny
I was
bit.
invited there by the Seneca guides, and I've been climbing for the lowest level.
I'm John Riedel, and I've been pulled up several times by these two there. Several times.
I'm Cindy Gray, and Reeds Creek and Smoke Canyon are my climbing gym.
Tyrell Johnson. For what now, 2-3 years, I've been helping Mike and Cindy out in the smoke hole. So I've climbed the poles a lot.
And he's responsible for anything that's wrong with the app.
The rack up app. I hope you're plugging that tonight.
Actually, Tyrell is the guy that wrote all of the good stuff in there. I am responsible for the dribble.
My name is Jamie Casterton, and I have not been to either.
Well, you know the answer, Carol, because I've climbed at both places with you.
Yes, indeed, that's true.
But what
But
about
we
the
don't know
rest of
your
us?
name. Simon, there's a plethora of people that don't know who you are, and they should.
I just say-
They need to know you. Sorry, what?
Simon Carr.
That's actually two words.
Yes.
Very good.
Hi, I'm Sylvan Law. I've been to Reeds Creek. That was fun, but I haven't been to Smoke Hole.
Corey Helps, I'm the treasurer. I've been to Reeds Creek.
I'm Adam, I'm the secretary. I have not been to either.
I'm Bill, never been to either. Never even heard of you.
Jeanette Helfrich, I've climbed a couple times at Reeds Creek and looking forward to the rest of them. Rest of the places that I've got a guidebook I should bring in to get signed.
I have a guidebook.
I got it in the car.
Maddie.
What was the question?
Just make one up. Just tell us some stuff
Is there
about
any
you.
pizza left?
Oh, I bought new gear.
Yay! New
I'm Maddie.
ultralights?
What?
New ultralights?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it.
Kevin Bialy, first meeting. I've never been to either.
Welcome. Greg Christopoulos, I've been there once in the 70s.
1870.
It started right under Washington's name.
Shots fired.
Yeah, and the mood turned dark.
And then the Confederates came through and chased them out. My name is Marty, and I've been there, I think, twice.
I'm Van Kozer. I have zero experience at either place. I just have zero experience.
I've seen you at Carter Rock.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you're right.
Eric Mail, and I have not been to either place. Driven past them a lot, longingly. Good to see you.
You're too, Siobhan.
I'm Siobhan. I have not been to either. I've heard of Siobhan? I'm Siobhan. No, it's pronounced Siobhan.
Yes.
But I've not been to either.
How do you pronounce it? Fonda? Right?
Oh,
You can call it fondant too. Well, I'm Jade. Okay. Well, I've never been to, and I don't even know where that is.
Reabsorb.
Yeah, neither one of us.
We have work to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm
Sounds
here,
like a trip
so
is in order.
hopefully somebody will take me there.
After this, we're all getting in my car and driving to Reeds Creek. Everybody that hasn't been
I'm okay
there.
with that.
Yes.
Did you stop at home to grab my gear?
I'm in Mill and I've been there a couple of times.
Both places?
My name's Rick Dodson. I'm also the Gearmeister.
Yes, you are.
So if you need any gear, let me know. We have plenty of gear.
I could use 2 Camel.
We do have those. You check them out and bring them back at the next meeting if you like.
You can.
So I've climbed, I can remember climbing in Franklin when it was new. I climbed there a bunch when it was new, and then it's been closed, and it's been open, it's been closed, it's been open. And I went out to Reeds Creek for the first time last year. It was really nice. I was really impressed. Nice trails, good bolts. So thank you for all that hard work. I did buy your guidebook when it first came out too. I said, I can buy this guidebook.
What's your last name?
Dotson.
It's like Jurassic Park. Yes, yes.
I saw it and I said, wow, this is somebody's gone and done this work. I should support it. It took me 3 years to get out there.
I'm Will. I haven't been to either of the places.
Is this your first meeting
Yep.
too, Will? Okay. How many first timers are here today?
Oh,
Oh, welcome everybody. That's
Wow,
fantastic.
so
Nice. So, with no
Who's
further.
this young lady? Wait.
Oh.
With-
Yeah, you
She's
said
further
Skype.
here, then disappeared over there.
How did, oh, I see.
I try. Jenny O'Brien, I've been to Franklin, for the car, have never been to,
Oh, really?
state, and it's been a while, that I've been out of climbing for some years now, so I have no idea what I wanted to. I don't know where I was, you know, I remember. I enjoyed it,
That's all that matters.
and I'm hoping to get back this year.
We'll look forward to you coming back.
I'm Carol. I think you've heard the vice chair, and I've been to Reed's. Reed's was my first lead,
Do you know
outside
the last
lead.
name?
No, I don't. It's just Carol.
Like
And-
Cher
Exactly, like Cher.
and Bonnet.
Exactly. It's Carol Clayton, and Reed's my first lead, and I went to Smoke Hole last fall for the first time, and I've been to Franklin too. So, with no further ado, let me introduce Neil Arsenault, who will then introduce Mike Gray.
It's like a.
Should I introduce
It's
you?
an independent reentry vehicle.
Okay. For those of you who don't know Mike Gray, and I suspect there's more people here who know of him than actually know him.
In a good way.
Or if you read Rock and Ice, he's made guest appearances there. I've been climbing for 55 years, and I would say if 40 years ago you ran into this guy somewhere in the Shenandoah Valley, like Raleigh Springs, where he started climbing, you would have probably walked away thinking, angry young man. Today,
I will punch you if you keep this.
Wait, he's your friend, Mike?
I owe him money.
Okay.
neither of us have friends.
Okay,
So, it could have been, it's okay.
I got it.
We're bonded by hate.
I
So,
understand.
so 40 years ago, you thought this guy was an angry young man. Today, you'd be only half right.
Shows up the whole-
He's not a young man anymore. But he does have a reputation for being outspoken and a little bit on the angry side about a number of issues. And anybody who has formed that opinion of him is wrong. I've been fortunate enough over the years to meet a lot of significant climbers, Robbins and Chenard, and Harding, and Bouchard, and Bragg. And, I at one time was dating Chris McDivitt, who was the CEO of Patagonia, and then married Chris Walker, who was the guy who started North Face.
You were married to Chris Walker?
Yeah. First husband.
Yes, and
Before that was a thing.
and
Don't ask them that.
they then,
Not there's
after
anything wrong
leaving
with that.
the corporate world, went to Patagonia and spent large part of their personal fortunes buying up land for conservation of what's really a national treasure in Patagonia. Out of all those people, I don't think I know anybody who is more passionate, not angry, but passionate about climbing than this fellow. And not just the part of getting your ass from the ground up to wherever it is you're trying to get to, but the whole package, the conservation, the community. This guy cares a lot about what he's doing, and he's not afraid to speak out and share those opinions, sometimes without being especially political about it. But underneath all of it is that passion for climbing and conservation. That's Mike Gray. Meeting adjourned.
All right. Pizza and beer for everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, boy.
Actually, right before we start, we missed you. You sort of
We did.
slid.
I'm Will's driver.
I drove you here.
I did just go to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. They had a meeting in DC a few weeks ago. And that sparked our interest, so.
Great.
So Will started, he's done a lot of planning. I wanted to support it.
You started in a great place.
You have a harness?
Are you,
Does
do you
he
want to
have a
get
harness?
over there?
I'm
so
gonna
that
step right
they-
up
are
here,
you
so
gonna-
no signal will be right on my.
Pretty accurate.
While there are chairs, yeah, don't be chairs. I'm not
Am
gonna
I?
bite them. Swear to God.
No marks?
Well,
Evidence.
despite the fact that they announced that I would be talking just about smoke hole, I'm actually going to talk about bolting, which is something that I've been doing for 23 years out of the over 40 that I've been climbing. So let me just run through the spiel that I've got written down here, and I'll digress a bit every now and again. As many people have indicated, I am Mike Gray. I wrote and self-published a climber's guide to Smoke Hole Canyon, where I put up many of the first routes after Daryl Hensley, who was a very well-known Seneca rock climbing guide. Daryl invited us there to help him develop routes in Smoke Hole. One afternoon, when we were all gathered in Franklin, and Franklin was not bolted out, but it was coming up on it rapidly, and we knew that there were some access questions, and we were looking at impact. And it not being our land, we weren't entirely happy with that impact. Daryl very kindly opened the door to an entire canyon that at that point in time, I think, aside from trad routes, had less than 100 bolts in it. And we went there and, in very technical terms, lost our tiny minds. Along with Tyrell Johnson, I wrote the rackup.com apps for Reeds Creek, which is just outside of Smoke Hole Canyon. It relates to the events at Franklin because after dealing with the access issues at Franklin, we didn't ever want to get caught out again. And I will get to how they relate. I'm the co-founder with my lovely wife, Cindy. We founded the Friends of Smoke Hole to take care of the trails, to pick up trash, and to interact with the community in a way that we hadn't really seen climbing doing up until then. Climbing events are held as an oil and water thing quite often, that climbing sort of floats on top of the community but doesn't mix with it. And we have really started to try to change that dynamic and involve the community, inform them and involve them and invite them to be a part of it, or at least to know what are y'all doing up there on them ledges? You get that question quite a bit. Along with ourselves, we have actually accumulated quite a group over the years. Right now, we are in the middle of a Trail Days week, where a group from Syracuse University has come down and taken part of their spring break. We spent all day Sunday, first doing trail work, transformed the entire Reeds Creek Trail, and then we pulled most of the cliff about a half an inch closer to the ground because they put ropes on everything. They love it. They think this place is absolutely magic. At the end of the night, I was standing around with a bunch of folks from upstate New York and points north of that, singing Country Roads, Take Me Home. So everybody becomes slightly West Virginian after exposure. I am the founder, editor, and frequent contributor to the Friends of Smoke Hole and Smoke Hole Canyon pages, which are on Facebook. And if any of you would like to know more about Smoke Hole, see some really cool images, and find out what goes on in the region, those are great resources to start with. I'm also the guy who infamously chopped those routes at Franklin.
Ooh.
Yes. That was actually in the middle of replacing all the hardware. So the myth that I chopped the routes at Franklin, to be factually accurate, I chopped quite a few routes and then put that hardware back with better hardware. All those routes were restored within 2 weeks with stainless steel hardware, after which my partner and I would work all week, come in on Friday and do trail work all night long. Get up on Saturday, climb for a little bit, and then do more trail work. And in the course of a month of doing this, we laid off what is the current trail at Franklin, 2 of us on Carpenter's Bay. Since we did that, we have hosted the only trail work events that have ever taken place at Franklin. We followed that with a dozen more stewardship events, including adopting the entire canyon and pulling 14 bags of trash, a dozen tires, and assorted garbage out of the river. We've done that a dozen times at Reed's Creek and at Smoke Hole. And Cindy and I have done volunteer work in 4 national forests, including the Coconino and the Pike in Arizona and in Colorado. Most recently in 2015 and 16, we both worked in 11 Mile Canyon, where when we were not explaining to people exactly how you camp, we were putting up new routes on granite that was amazingly close to the road that had never been touched before. Last year, I launched Share Up, which is a smoke hole anchor replacement and upgrade program. We are replacing all of the 23-year-old plated steel equipment that's in the canyon with stainless steel equipment, most of it wave bolts that are epoxied into the cliff in the old holes. So we have a renewable resource. We're pulling the bolts out, putting new bolts into those holes. So we're not creating a checkerboard of broken studs at the top of the cliff. We got support for this thanks to the folks at Climb Tech, which I know the club has a relationship with. Really great people. They worked with me every inch of the way, gave me bottom dollar prices to help with this, and that got us a lot further towards our goal. We had a GoFundMe that people still contribute to. God bless every one of their hearts. As of New Year's Day this year, I've been climbing for 43 years and have completed 200 routes in West Virginia, Virginia, Colorado, and Arizona. 57 of those were done with that lady right there, who is a stroke survivor, who's been fighting multiple sclerosis since 2001. In 2016, she suffered an aneurysm, which leading experts said was one of the largest cerebral aneurysms that they had ever seen anybody survive. That happened at the end of February. She had surgery at the end of March that took about 5 years off of my life in 4 hours. And by May, she was back in the front booth at 11 Mile Canyon, harassing campers and climbers. She is, coincidentally, an ambassador for Rock Climbing Women, which is a large group that operates all over the country and is headquartered out of California. Carol was kind enough to invite me to come here and waste most of an hour of your time. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about bolting as it relates to all of that. In '76, I learned to tie a harness out of 1-inch webbing and rappel with high-tech equipment like an SMC figure 8 and a spring-loaded stitch plate. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, do you? Okay. You'll see a picture that has some of that gear on it. You might want to remember it. I learned on the Skyline Drive in Shenandoah National Park. It was a class offered by a tiny shop in downtown Harrisonburg called the Geneva Spur, where they sold camping, climbing, backpacking, caving, and scuba equipment. Really neat mashup and some really cool people. It was good to talk to people who had hypoxia because I was able to converse with them on the level ground. Flash forward to '89 and a decade behind the curve, the guys in Yosemite had already been doing this for quite a while. We ran into bolted climbing at Franklin. We were looking for some place to go, and one of the folks that worked at Wilderness Voyagers, which was what had been Geneva Spur, was Tracy Ram. Tracy Ram, for those of you who might know West Virginia climbing just a little better, is currently Mrs. Eddie Bagoon. In her own right, she's a serious sender. She's a great outdoors woman. She's a heck of a boater. And she said, you should go check this place out. We wound up there, but what we didn't know was that we were on private land. We assumed that because it had trees, it was national forest. There were maps available. There's no excuse for what happened. We just simply presumed. So when I put my first route there in 1992, the very first bolt that I ever placed was on private land and without permission of the owner. So I'm not preaching to you as somebody that is preaching from a high ground. I'm the guy that screwed up and has been trying to make it right ever since. which is why when questions arose about the ownership at Reed's Creek from a retired federal law enforcement officer who informed us that we were on his land, the National Forest signs at the top of the cliff indicated differently. I contacted Elkins, talked to them about it, got maps. We got them out there to resurvey it and to make sure that we were not making the same mistakes again. Presently, I hate to say it, but the only people who fail to respect the boundaries are climbers who just have to go up onto the top, which is not public land, and see what's up there. And unfortunately, that's how access issues usually begin and often continue. Despite the best efforts of local stewards, climbers seem determined to hold on to willful ignorance, either to satisfy their desires of the day or because they'd rather listen to a pot dealer who will tell them that access is okay than a local climber who will tell them that it isn't. I hope that while I'm talking to you, I can at least shed a little bit of light and not just confuse you. So what I'd like to tell you is, from my point of view, what does it take to bolt routes? Experience. The more high quality routes that you climb, the more high quality climbers that you climb with, the better your routes will be. If you're going to place bolts, there's really only one way to get experience at that, and you place bolts. If you'd like to know how to place bolts and put up new routes, you've probably got friends that are putting up routes. They're good people to get with. Ask people that you're comfortable to ask questions of. Talk to people that you're comfortable talking to. Another way that you can learn is to join anchor replacement initiatives. They're going on all over the country. Just about every crag that has any age on it, and I'm not talking age like me and Neil, is replacing bolts right now. And there are opportunities just about everywhere that you go. Get involved. Go out there, join a hump gear, carry it out there, ride a belay device all day and help people with the work. And you're going to find out a lot more about climbing and a lot more about placing bolts the right and the wrong way and what it takes to fix it when you do either one. What else does it take? It takes inclination, obviously, because it's not nearly as much fun as it looks like to drill holes in a cliff and put bolts on. Unless you're going to define your route setting career by adding variation starts and endings to existing lines or squeezing in routes on an already established wall, you're going to be exploring, and that means hiking. Get in good shape if you plan on putting up new routes. If you aren't when you start, you will be by the time you're done. Google Earth and other platforms are great for looking all over and finding where there's rock, but in the end, if you're going to find new rock, you're going to get out, you're going to hike. And after that, you can look forward to days, maybe weeks or months, during which you will hike and cut brush. Hike and set up anchors and wrap and tap rock. Hike in, wrap and jug and pry and swear. You will hike in and drill and occasionally screw up placements, get rained out and dehydrated, stung by bees and poison ivy in places only your significant other can reach.
You're making this sound really good.
I'm trying to. You will get ticketed or at least gently investigated by both local law and the citizens, all while you figure out camping and supply and the best long-term access, knowing that eventually someone will try to find a shortcut based, as I said, on someone who doesn't know anything about it. People who treasure their own privacy seem to have little or no problem giving climbers permission to walk across private property they don't own. As somebody who did it, don't do that. Sounds fun already, doesn't it? All right. Even if you're on an established trail, it's still not that easy to go find new lines and get them put up. So now that we've covered experience and work ethic, why would you want to bolt routes? If you have National Forest, BLM land, and it's available and open, it's got good parking, or you have a National Forest staff that is amenable to making changes and will work with you to figure out parking to maybe improve or expand it, get out there. Or if you find an incredible remote crag on public land, with absolutely stellar rock and no population of rare or endangered species. It's another thing to remember because you need to do that research on your own. I asked the Monongahela National Forest, who assured me that no place in Smoke Hole had endangered species before I wrote my guidebook. After I wrote my guidebook, I found out that that was not entirely true. And so those are places that will never have an app. They will never be included in any future guide. Sanctuary, if you have the paper guide right there, is one of the places where there is not only if it's not endangered, it is very sensitive to pressure species of salamander, and I know there are 2 plants that grow there. If you have private land with access and a great relationship with the owner and a good core group, I have 3 words for you. Go for it. Bolting for the wrong reasons, no matter what the magazines may say, not everyone needs to bolt a route. If you're just trying to make your mark on an existing crag by squeezing in a new line or adding a variation no one else needed to bolt during the decades of the crag's existence, you shouldn't bolt. Nothing is uglier than grid bolting. I get up and look at this in the morning, okay? It's easier to add a route than to get rid of all the potential effects of one ill-placed bolt or route. Thank you, man. Bolting your way into the history books will happen. You place a bolt, you're there for good. How you continue to be involved in the history of the bolts you place is what matters. Bolting a route and then only coming back to climb it or promote yourself without supporting or participating in stewardship, that's graffiti. It's just done with bolts. Without a doubt, the most important thing that you will actually need to put up routes is information. In the information age, there are at least 2 free platforms for finding out whether or not you're on public land: usgs.gov and mytopo.com. You can click on any part of the United States of America and get very clearly defined boundaries. Your local ranger station, amazingly enough, is still a functional part of the government. They have information on bolting and access issues. They'll be some of the first people that do. They sell good old-fashioned paper maps. Those things are amazing. You can just fold one up, put it in your pocket, and the batteries never die.
Until the sun goes down.
They can also use the money.
Headlamps.
As I said, be aware of wildlife and native species. Bears, for instance, refer to quite a few undeveloped crags by an odd word, home. They share that tendency with a number of predators, scavengers, wildflowers, and inimical plants, any number of which may be rare, sensitive, or endangered. That info is also very readily available from rangers, and it's better to get it where they are than to have them tell you where you are, because that usually involves them giving you a copy of something that just disposed of some of your income. Most people belong to an online climbing site or a group like this, which has a database that can give you info on whether or not your new find that you're just so ready to bolt was in fact something that Neil Arsenault climbed about the time that we invented nylon ropes. I will warn you that as somebody who combs through those databases, it is a maze of replicated and inaccurate information, so don't take them as a final source. As with most things that you research, the more that you know, the more you will know. Do not assume that just because you found bolts, it's okay for you to bolt where you found them. Again, if they're not on public land, they're not on your land, you don't have any right to be there. Unless and until you have spoken to the landowner or belong to a club that has communicated directly with those landowners and has an agreement, you are trespassing. And that is still a crime. People in the country take that very seriously. It is better to wait a day and drill with assurance than to drill in haste and repent at leisure. You need to be familiar with your materials. As with anything you're going to do, you know how your ropes are made and what strengths they have. You know what goes into your gear. Find out what's going to go into your bolts. Find out what the opinion is of the experts in the industry as to what the best material you can use is, and take the time and the money to get it. Most common bolts are about 3 inches long and 3/8 to a half an inch thick. They will hold the weight of your car. For any of you who have ever had any doubts whatsoever, if you could pick your vehicle up off the ground and clip it to a bolt hanger, it would stay there. There are a variety of hangers. Each has its good points and its bad points. I like ClimbTech, and I know the club has a relationship with them, but in the end, I vote with my wallet because I don't have that much money to throw around. I still only use stainless steel because there is no reason to leave headaches for the future. We're dealing with that problem now. Don't put garbage back in the wall. It doesn't cost that much more, and it will last probably for your entire climbing life. So take the time, get the good stuff. There are reviews and forum discussions ad nauseum about all of this. So if you'd like to know what the whole world thinks about it, as if that will really give you the opinion of experts, go out there and find out. You can actually find places where people like Warner Braun and other legends are talking about gear like this. Go find them. There's online information plenty. But if you're going to get into this game, understand that if you will bolt routes and you want to get into it for the long term and be completely independent, you're going to spend about $1,800 for a drill, bolts, charger, batteries, all of the aid gear that you're going to need, the ropes you're going to throw away after they've been impregnated with rock dust, and in some cases epoxy, because we're gluing bolts in now, and there is nothing like trying to rappel down a rope coated with epoxy to tell you that you're probably not going to be using this much longer. Spend as little as you can to get the best that you can, because importantly enough, every dollar that you do not spend on brand loyalty, you can spend on more gear, or more importantly, cold beer. The next thing you're going to need is that gear. It's fine to use the club's drill, but you're going to have to invest. Invest wisely. Take your time, buy the good stuff, buy what's going to last. You can go to Harbor Freight and get a hammer drill, no problem. Next month, you can go back and get another one when that breaks. You can keep doing that, and after a year, you'll have spent twice as much as I have. What else do you need? Encouragement. John Burcham, who taught me to climb and who currently is the photo editor for National Geo's Adventure Photography Division, who also took our wedding photos, had a strict rule. No students. None. Fact of the matter is, that was strictly tongue-in-cheek. John, Eddie Bagoon, George Powell, all of the older climbers that we knew when I was an angry young man had absolutely no problem mentoring us by telling us what was right, what was wrong, and more importantly, when we were being stupid. That was not a politically incorrect term in those days. To teach, you lead by example and admit your mistakes, but you cannot be afraid to criticize. My opinion, but if you have experience and you go into public lands to climb, you have an equal responsibility to those lands, to your fellow climbers, and to climbing, not to mention the community around those areas, to share what you know, to point out serious mistakes, and to try to show people a way to be gentler in their impact on the land. You also need to be part of fixing those problems. It's not a popular feeling in the age of participation trophies, but hurt feelings do not require search and rescue. They do not come with a hospital or funeral bill, and no one has ever closed a crag because their feelings got hurt. Your final requirement for bolting climbs is not carved in stone, but it should be, and it should be responsibility. Climbing's future is a lot more important than your reputation. Acknowledging the mistakes of the past and working harder to fix them often requires worrying less about your reputation than honestly informing and educating climbers about the challenges and the opportunities for maintaining access to crags and the routes for the next generation. I got 3 granddaughters, and God willing, someday they're going to be out there at the crags being just as irascible as I am and saying, my grandpa put this up, and they'll be saying that in the middle of a trail day that they will have organized and that they're taking part in. Supporting local businesses establishes a dialogue and needs to be followed by community outreach. And by that, I do not mean working in a soup kitchen, but donations to local food pantries and clothing closets are appreciated far more than you will ever know if you have not been homeless and too poor to buy new clothes. As two people who have, we can tell you that if it were not for goodwill and it were not for the donations of good people, our lives would have been a much different thing, and I probably would not be standing here now. Some of you can go ahead and curse the charities at this point. Respecting local communities and landowners has a double benefit because it engenders mutual respect. And when you have that, those private crags, those rocks off in the distance that nobody's ever gotten to climb and nobody ever thought they would, those doors can open if you've shown that you care, that you're not just somebody that's there thinking that this is a great big outdoor 7-Eleven. It's not a convenience store. It's their world too. Share it with them, show them that you respect it, and they'll share it back to you. And what does it take to keep going? Affirmation, more than anything else, for people to tell you those are pretty good routes. When I put routes up at Franklin, I'm not going to say that they got rave reviews, but they got rave reviews. And when you have people whose names are in guidebooks and whose pictures are in magazines telling you that you've done a good job at this little chunk of rock in the middle of West Virginia, when you know that they just came back from the Rockies or the High Sierra, that hits you right there. If you do a really good job, you get to go to new places. That's how I found Smoke Hole. Daryl walked up to us after climbing our routes and said, you guys need to come help us explore Smoke Hole and put up routes down there. I was also taken to a place called Bear Haven. I don't know if any of you have been there. Neil, are you familiar with Bear Haven? It's a place that's a little further west in West Virginia, and it is gorgeous bouldering. And the rule when we were taken there, we were told by every single person, every guide that we talked to, no bolts. Bold was the rule, not bolts, bold. That has passed. There are bolts there now, just like there are at every other climbing area. It is important to respect tradition. It is not beyond asking questions about that tradition, but be aware of what they are. Don't repeat our mistakes. The best testimony of all, of course, is when guides show up to bolt your routes that you're working on, but we'll talk about that another day. In the end, I don't make the rules. We all make the rules. Because what the federal government sees and what rangers can cover out there in the field, there are not nearly enough of them to cover climbing. So if we don't police ourselves, everything that happens to climbing and to climbers, the limitations that are placed on us in the future, we will have no one except the person in the mirror to blame. What I ask of every one of you, whether you decide to develop routes or not, but especially those of you who decide to develop routes, is take the time to double check your boundaries just the same way that you double check your knot and your partner's knot, your harnesses and your gear. Weigh impulse against need, just like when you're placing gear. Do you really need a bolt there? If you don't do it. Respect the rights of the people around the crags because it's their home. You're just visiting. Respect them the way you would respect your fellow climbers of every faith and gender, ethnicity, and orientation. My real hope, honestly, is that if you do bolt a line, you make it the very best line that you could possibly have bolted. You make it a great line at an incredible crag with a history that you'll be proud of every time that you think of it in the future, because I can promise you, you will think of it in the future. If you can avoid our mistakes, you'll have fewer issues and more time to climb. And isn't that the goal in the end? That's all I got. Should I launch that?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. And then we take some questions.
To what this man has said.
We have a unique relationship. We kind of go at each other in that
And I value that.
I have never put up a sport route. I've never climbed a sport route. And in fact, until today, I had told Mike something a little erroneous. I told him I had never clipped a bolt.
After
I
he,
remember that.
what he described, he really hasn't yet.
I did clip a bolt once up in New Hampshire. But we share a lot of common ground on conservation and courtesy, landowner access, as he was talking about. But the two things I wanted to say is, if you're gonna learn to bolt, you don't do that in a climbing area. You go find a trash boulder somewhere out in the woods or on a talus slope that nobody is probably ever gonna see again in 20 years after you put that bolt in. That's where you learn how to place a bolt, because there is skill and technique involved in doing that. You don't learn at an established climbing area. Second thing is, if you are putting in a new route or a variation on a new route, I think it's absolutely paramount that you remember that what you're doing is permanent. If you're trad climbing and you screw up the cam placement, it affects nobody but you. You don't get that stopper in right, it's your ass in the line, and when your second comes up and pulls it out, it's over and done with, and nobody's ever gonna know you passed through there. Once you've bolted a line, you have permanently altered the rock. And I think there needs to be a considerable ethic buy-in to say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that without screwing it up. Because what you leave behind is gonna be there for everybody to see 50 years from now. And that's a very different thing than going out and even doing really hard trad climbing sometimes.
And unless you are a very, very shallow human being, 50 years from now, if you're still here, you'll be regretting that. If you screw it up, if you bolt over someone else's line and you care about that sort of thing, and you should, you're going to really regret that. Even on your best climbing day at the end, you're probably going to think about that route.
Or worst case scenario, a bolt that you put in that you didn't get right kills somebody because they wind up taking a 50-footer instead of a 10-footer, or it's the wrap anchor for that route, and that's a whole different thing.
So I know you're both going to do a clinic on bolting at some point this spring.
We
So
do
I
hope
think
to
it's
do a
worth
bolting clinic.
mentioning that you can actually, instead of going out and trying to make it up on your own, you can do your clinic.
If you would like, any of you, I would like to invite you all at any point in time. If you're going to be in our neck of the woods, my number and my email are both out there online in more places than I probably know, but I put it in quite a few places because I have tried to be accessible. I have tried very, very hard to be accessible so that anybody who has questions about access in the area, I've made it my business to go out and find out. I've made it my business. I worked in construction for 35 years. So when I placed my first climbing bolt, I already had about 1,000 bolts under my belt that I had placed under the critical and very sarcastic eye of carpenters that are probably the basis of my deep and abiding affection for Neil. What was really good was I got paid to screw up. You cannot pay to erase a screw up on the route. So do, as Neil said, you can go out, find yourself a big talus field, put bolts there. Got a friend that's doing some renovation in his garden, got some big boulders he wants to place. Go over there, drill some holes in those on the bottom, flip them over, cover up your mistakes. Just pretend you're a surgeon. But we would like to invite you all out. We're going to be doing bolt replacement until we're done with smoke hole. And that could take a while, as at present, it's Tyrell, myself, and one other person who occasionally do that. And it takes about an hour to pull a very recalcitrant bolt and to put it back in. To touch on what Neil was talking about screwing up a placement, oddly enough, the newest bolts that we deal with are the easiest ones to screw up. Climatech wave bolts or any other epoxy bolt requires that epoxy to be mixed correctly. It requires it to be placed in the right conditions, in a hole that has been appropriately drilled and cleaned. And that is a lot more work than rat bolting around and tapping in stud bolts. I say this having done both. And I can tell you that if you don't put in glue-in bolts correctly, people not only can, but more than likely will die.
So Andy and I did a clinic for the club about a year ago out at the Cove. If you don't know the Cove, it's understandable. It's a small area, privately owned, just west of Winchester, which is a whole lot closer than Franklin. We're doing a day clinic. It's a campground that for decades was closed to climbing. The owner just wanted no part of anybody coming and knocking on his door and saying, hey, is it okay to go up on those cliffs? The answer was no. His son now owns the campground and has a good relationship with Andy and is for a nominal fee, kind of like climbing at the Dunks, you pay to climb. There's an area with undeveloped cliff that runs for miles. And it's the kind of place that, like the new, most things that are going to go in are going to be fairly hard. And like the new, pretty much anything that goes in is going to be bolt protected. So if we do another clinic this spring, I've been talking to Andy about it, we'll probably go back to the Cove. And we also may be following that up or preceding that with a club-sponsored Trails Workday out at Smoke Hole for Long Branch or wherever you decide
We have opportunities.
Impact.
We have plenty of opportunities because for every single person who comes and does trail work, and this is another dynamic that I would really hope that climbers work very hard on changing. For every person that comes and does trail work, I recently read that there are roughly 1,000 people who will climb at that area who will never even think about it.
Wow.
And showing up for one of those trail work days is absolutely the most straightforward way to get beta on access and where the cliffs are and where the climbs are. It's like having a live guidebook walking around in the woods with you in return for, moving some rocks and shoveling some dirt. Yeah.
And the local landowners see that. They
And-
see all those out-of-state license plates who, for once, are not parked out in the middle of the road being stupid, but are actually giving back. When they see big crowds of us out there, most recently, we were parked at the end of Reeds Creek Road with our group. Very rarely when you are in West Virginia, does a large number of license plates from New York City get a friendly wave. Just about every single person who drove by us was smiling and waving. We saw people later that day in town, and they were still smiling and talking to each other. We eventually were like, why are those people sitting over at that table all smiling at us? I don't know them. Cindy said, they're the ones that drove by earlier today and saw us at Trail Days. So right there, you're opening doors. You're creating a positive impact on the community just by participating.
And it's worth saying that it's fun. I've done Seneca Trail Days a few times. Yeah.
It is
it's a
fun, and
horrible
for
ride.
those of
It's
you who are
fun.
carnivores, I will promise to feed you a breakfast burrito that will keep you moving for at least a day.
You didn't say there was food.
There's food.
There's always food at our trail days.
Look at me. What do you think I live on? Tofu? Come on.
She delivers breakfast burritos to your tent.
Yeah. And I
You had me at breakfast burritos.
He makes them, I deliver them.
I most recently began work for a cidery that just opened up in the area. Swill Dog Hard Cider is opening a tasting room, and they are already deep in contemplation of the idea of becoming our sponsors. Whether or not they become sponsors, I can promise you that if you come out, we'll feed you and booze you. Any more questions?
All right. This is like the most amazing crowd I have seen
So I
at this,
told him.
at this meeting for the longest time. And they told me that you were the irascible guy.
I was handing out dollar bills earlier. So all these people are paid.
Whatever it is.
Like,
Anyway,
Well, you know, you usually get groups like this in Lynch.
Are you, wait, you have photos to show, don't you? Mike, don't you
Okay,
have
so-
photos?
one,
I
we'll
do.
put those up in a second.
Yeah.
So one, thank you very much. Two, let's roll the photos. Three, can we take a break for 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
And then have a business meeting?
Oh,
Okay,
God.
so, yeah, I know, boring.
I tried my best, Carol. I'm sorry. I talked so
I thought we
hard.
talked about
I'm
this.
trying
You
to
were
talk
gonna run out
slower.
of the business meeting.
Well, look,
Thank
I'm-
you very much. Short break, roll the photos.
All right.
I'm actually quite, I would love to see them. Thank you again. Everybody who wants to hang around, we'll talk about upcoming events, including, trail days cleanups and actually going climbing.
Folks, real quick. I mentioned Franklin, and Simon made the very good point that I should go ahead and clarify this. There's a lot of discussion about whether Franklin is or is not open. The most recent information that I have is that a member of the DC chapter of the AAC contacted the current owners of Franklin. They do not want climbing to be ongoing at Franklin. They are not comfortable with it. I can tell you that the parking there and the way that 95% of climbers treat their land is not going to be anything that's going to encourage them to reopen it. There is a gate that the elderly gentleman who actually owned the land used to access the top. It very clearly had a sign on it for a long time that said, "Do not block." You usually couldn't read it because of the 3 cars that would be parked in front of it. I have watched a truckload of logs come down that road, and that in and of itself was a challenge to get that truckload of logs down off that ridge without rolling it. When they got to the bottom, they couldn't get out because there were 3 cars parked in front of that gate. It was great fun for me to sit on the opposite side of the parking lot and watch them swing those 4-ton logs across those cars to put them on another truck. But you just cost loggers the price of another truck, the time that it took to unload that one and put it on that one, that was dollars out of their pocket that didn't cost the climbing community a dime. So when 5 new no trespassing signs went up in 2009, we respected that. Now, John can tell you that in law, there's a pretty basic rule, and it's a question that you ask. Who benefits? Why would I lie to you and tell you that a crag where I have routes that is literally within sight of my house is closed? I have not climbed at Franklin since the last time that we did trail work there. The only time that I have gone back since then was to help another group with some ideas about trail work and to do some small repairs. We didn't climb that day. We went in, we did trail work, and we went to Smoke Hole. So as of right now, officially, according to the family and according to the AAC vice social chair of the DC chapter, there is no climbing at Franklin by request of the family. People are still going there. I can tell you that this past weekend, and this is spring break week, there are probably people camped there right now who will be climbing there for as long as the weather is good. Think of it as a test. They put up the signs, which, by the way, miraculously disappeared about 3 weeks after I began to post online that there were brand new no trespassing signs. And I don't know any farmers that put up no trespassing signs and then tear them down. These people also have a grasp of English. If they don't want you climbing, they don't get a sign that says no trespassing. They write one that says no climbing. So when they say no trespassing, we need to respect the no in that. Until we do, they're not going to return the calls of the Access Fund. They're not going to respond to any offers, and they have not responded to those offers for years. Despite the rather notorious local guide who will tell you that in their experience, knocking on a landowner's door or ringing their phone to ask for permission before you climb on their land never turns out well, not doing so turns out worse. going back when you know an area is closed is the very best way to keep it closed. So for right now, I would love it if you folks could give up the 100 aging bolts routes of Franklin. Come to Smoke Hole. I'll walk you around myself to keep you off private land because there's nothing I would love better than to literally to be able to walk from my house to a crag that right now is off limits to me. I'm not going there until I know that there's access. If we all do that, it might not be long, but let's give it a chance. Flowers don't grow when you walk on them. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
The Franklin situation is actually even slightly more serious than Mike is saying. Franklin, when it was developed, it's always been privately owned. But when it was developed, it was done with the permission of the current landowner.
Then current
Then
landowner.
current landowner. 9 years ago, the property changed hands. It was posted, no trespassing. And for 9 years, climbing groups, guide services, clubs have not only intentionally ignored the no trespassing for 9 years, but they've also said, it doesn't mean climbers. They don't want people going in there and partying. It doesn't mean all climbers, but it's okay for us. We knew them. We have permission. We have, as a community, the collective group, have been intentionally trespassing in Franklin for 9 years now, and we're still doing it.
I think we actually held an event there for women to learn crack climbing.
I don't think it was Franklin, but
Wasn't it Frank? I thought it was a Franklin.
anyway, lesson taken. So, welcome back to the always exciting business meeting. Yeah, sorry, Dad's back.
We were having such a nice party.
Yeah, I bet.
Can I stand you again?
It was beer and everything.
Okay, general discussion, past activities. Anybody want to report on Dak's Big House?
No?
Carol,
Yes, pardon?
would you like to report on Dak's Big House?
Dak's Big House was wonderful. The house was amazing. We have it for next year again. And we-
Wow, okay.
Yeah, she was so impressed, unlike our bad showing in Franklin, we apparently did very well in the Adirondacks. So she said we were such a good group and it was so nice to be able to know that their house would be well taken care of. She would give us a very good price, just raising it a little tiny bit for next year. So that's awesome news. So put that on your calendars for the next President's Day weekend, ice climbing in the Dax.
Are you gonna show them your new hat?
Oh, God, yeah. And I will be wearing it.
No, just have your cool off for that.
Yes, so since I was the house mom, now I have an official house mom hat. And this is it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Neil. So yeah, the Dax house was great. What else? I think that's it. That's all my part.
We had a good little crevasse rescue drill clinic, tree whitetail out at Carter Rock. It was fun for those of you who came. Learned a lot. Let's see, we had an XCOM meeting. We're going to talk about the calendar. I don't think we had anything else significant. Upcoming events. Whitetail Snow Skill Day. We still don't know what date it's going to be. I'm personally guessing 50-50 for March 23rd and March 30th. But it'll be what it is. It's definitely not this weekend. Let's see, Top Rope Anchors.
April 6th, Carter Rock, rain or shine. If it rains, we'll go inside the pavilion.
Okay.
There's been a lot of activity signing up. I got 20 people who signed up for the clinic. And I've had nobody offer to help me do it. If anyone would like to work Saturday morning with me, let me know. That's set and ready to go.
Excellent. New Followers Weekend.
We're still looking for leaders, but we're making good progress.
Are we, okay, so
Yeah.
are we up, how many
We
leaders?
will actually have a new followers.
Okay, we will have it and it will be the 20th of April.
It will be the 20th of April if the weather is good, and we're also hoping that it will coincide with the party at Seneca for the 80th anniversary of the
Right,
first
so
recorded.
can you tell us what we know about the party on 20th, on the
We
week that
know
weekend?
that, so far I'm doing.
No,
I'm working
that
on-
is a bad idea, but okay.
Had some
I'm working on
geological seismic evidence that the
No,
rock is
but,
on
but there will be
stable.
something, there will be, and we're trying to get John Christian, so anybody that knows original climbers, like back in the day, names, people we can reference, anything, please let us know.
Right, so the weekend of April 20th is the anniversary of the 80th, which is the first recorded ascent of.
Recorded, we know
the-
people climb.
We know it was there, it's not the actual first ascent, but it's the first recorded ascent of the south summit of Seneca Rocks.
Right.
So there will be a party out at Seneca that weekend.
They're planning on doing maybe a climb,
We're at-
not going with hemp rope,
We're-
but with like the tool, everything else, the tools of the day. You're
There
gonna
has,
wear your boots,
some people may indeed attempt to climb
Exactly.
Seneca that day in the style of 1939.
Exactly.
And it won't be
Dresses
nailed.
and everything?
Pardon?
Dresses and everything?
Women climb in dresses, there were pants.
There were pants. So Neil,
Back in
Neil,
the
I just-
old 30s.
I just know
you
there's
want to
there've been
comment
some
on the
pictures
style of
popping up
1939?
recently.
Really, we're so close.
Although I did get a very nice present
Uh-huh.
recently from John Christian.
Uh-huh.
And, when I got the honorary life membership,
Mhm.
John gave me a framed mounted, piton
Uh-huh.
from the first ascent of Prune
Mhm.
that, not just an old rusty piton, but the piton, which was the
Mhm.
only protection they had
Mhm.
on the first pitch of Prune. And John led it, Arnold's came up and lifted the pin out from behind the
Yep.
plate with his fingers.
Oh,
That was the only protection
Yep.
for the whole first
Uh-huh.
pitch.
So they could use it
And
again.
so John gave it to me, because John and I did the second ascent of Prune together, where
The same people?
he had originally wanted Prune to be a directissimo.
Mhm.
And he thought the climb wandered a little bit, so he took me up there because he was supposed to take the wrinkles out of Prune. And the way that went was he would belay holes up here, you know. So remembering that event, I got the original John and Arnold pin from the first ascent of Prune.
So if you really thought you wanted to do the 1939 style, remember, aside from the fact that you need hemp ropes, which you can't even buy, but assuming we use modern ropes,
Oh,
we're
I can
still
find
talking about tennis shoes or hiking boots, probably no more than 3 carabiners, no nuts,
Not webbing.
no hip
There wouldn't have
belays,
been webbing.
no
harnesses
webbings.
or
Maybe
anything.
just tie in.
They had-
They had what they call line slings.
Tie in
But
the
there's an interesting
yeah.
historical
Cord of different
footnote here.
thicknesses.
They sound very uncomfortable.
Two club members.
Mhm.
There's a lot of history to Patsy that's
Mhm.
just kind of disappearing.
Well,
Arnold Wexler, who
Mhm.
was active in the club for many, many years and worked, I believe at NIH, was one of the people responsible for developing nylon ropes.
Yeah.
He was at the Bureau of Standards.
Bureau of Standards, thank you, yes. First nylon ropes from a Patsy
Mhm.
club member. And the other thing that Patsy did, just about the same time, and even got written up by Gaston Rébuffat in his books in
Mhm.
France, we invented dynamic belay.
Oh,
at
yes.
Carter Rock.
Right.
Wow.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
We had a
There's a
practice
tree.
dummy.
A tree.
It was Neil, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
There's a tree at the bottom of Northern Face that was known as the Oscar tree. It had telephone pole spikes going up to a platform high up in the tree. That's all gone. And they would rig ropes and pull a 150-pound cement weight up and then drop it. And that's how they taught people how to belay it.
And actually, I think
There's
I
videos
think
of that
There's
online.
videos.
There's
Yeah.
videos. I think it's on the Patsy YouTube
So
channel.
we are not
on
only
the
responsible for
Patsy.
developing.
Neil, that's on the
Nylon
Patsy
rope.
website, right? Yeah. So it was very in climbing clubs of yore. It was normal that one of the sort of entrance requirements for the club was to demonstrate that you could hold a large dropped object on a hip belay. And that was, some would call that hazing, but It might also be called the safety test.
Checking proficiency.
And there are some videos of that, actually, some vintage videos of that on the PATC-MS website. Should anybody be
Nylon
interested?
ropes and dynamic delay, both came out of this one.
And if you do try to imitate again in the style of 39, the part you'll really enjoy is rappelling off with the Dolfer sits method, which involves no carabiners, only wrapping the rope around your body. Yes. Let's see, Cinco de Mayo, I believe we have campsite, Adam? Do we?
I think we do.
Or Corey, excuse me?
Yeah.
Okay, which one? Is it a group or do we have individuals?
That one is group.
Okay.
Followers is individual.
Okay. Carter Rock first Wednesday will commence. Rick? Walked out.
Back to your mind
Oh, you went back to your mind. Okay, so we will take another run at Carter Rock first Wednesdays. Rick Dotson has volunteered to be the host. That will begin 3 April, so look for the announcements of that. We'll try to have be welcoming to new people at Carter Rock. Like last year, it'll get rained out half the time anyway. New Trad Leader Day is tentatively scheduled for 9 June. So we'll look for signups for that. Access issues. Now that the shutdown is over, the approval process for the initial Carter Rock repair is apparently working its way through the system. It is likely to be approved very soon, which means that we're going to be, there'll be an announcement for a Carter Rock work party sometime between now and late spring.
Are we involved with the lumber at the bottom of DC like that?
Well-
There's a stack of 4x4s tied to the cliff, so they won't wash away in high water.
Don't know anything about it.
Brand new lumber.
Really?
is right at the bottom of
No,
the
don't know anything about it.
Okay.
So the proposal, which is supposed to be approved, will permit wide replacement of all of the lumber and restoration of the lumber barriers that are in there. So a bunch of lumber is going to have to be moved down there. The old ones are going to have to be dug out, and the new ones are going to have to be appropriately rebarred in.
For whatever it's worth, it also looks like the Park Service is actively removing dead trees from the park. The big tree that lived right at the bottom of Beginner's Crack is now laying on the ground. Just this thing's this big around.
Okay.
Right at the ground level at the roots. So they're gonna be going in and removing all that stuff and dropping dead trees that are still standing.
Right. Yeah, I haven't been out to see, so I don't know what the local status is. Once the short-term proposal is approved, we will return to the process of trying to get a long-term fix proposed and approved. We started on that process last year. It pretty much went dead once the shutdown happened and we couldn't have anybody to negotiate with. There's no point in having two proposals running through the system at the same time, so we'll wait until this one kicks out before we put a new one in. I guess Rick is in back. If anybody who wanted to pull gear for whitetail should probably be getting it. I was going to ask a few things about status of gear. Let's see. Any other training events? Yes.
Jim DeCry?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Still the 13th.
I'm sorry, when?
13.
Oh.
Is it the 11th in our fallback?
All right, hold on.
Okay, what's the day?
Which month? April.
April 13th.
13th.
And that's
That's a Saturday.
27th has the back then?
Yeah.
And where will it be?
So, did I say Safe Harbor? Safe Harbor.
I hope so.
And New Climbers Day. May 11th.
Okay, May 11th.
Putting that one.
New climbers. Adam.
Hey, Rick?
Yep.
Here, hang out here for a second.
Okay.
Top rope kits, how are we doing? Or as far are they stacked up back there? Do they need to go out? Are they out? Where are we at with top rope kits?
Well, I checked the spreadsheet and I don't know what's out, so.
Oh, all right.
There is nothing on the spreadsheet apparently.
There's stuff on the spreadsheet, but it doesn't tell me what's been checked out.
Okay. Are there a bunch of them back there in the closet?
I don't know. I didn't go through all the bags of stuff, so
All right.
I was mostly going through the ice gear.
Okay. Just questions, and we don't have to be answered right now, but we should be looking to see, are we due for some rope replacement?
Okay.
I don't know. I think we have replaced a couple of.
I think
we
you really
have
need to take
some
that closet
replaced.
and just empty it completely out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
recall that, I thought we had gotten like a spool of essentially
did.
gym rope.
Like
Did we ever
600.
cut that up?
I thought we did, but I don't know that.
Okay,
I don't actually know what it's at. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't
I
recall
don't see
it.
a big roll of rope in there. I mean, I
I-
see lots of bags of stuff.
Right. So we
Maybe
had a
those bags.
big roll of gym rope, which was to be cut up for top rope kits.
Okay.
And I thought that was already done, but I don't know for sure that that's the
Right.
case.
Okay.
I'll try to get through the closet in the next couple of weeks and just empty it out and see what's in there.
We do me a favor, when you do that, associated with different thing. About 2 years ago, Patsy remodeled the library upstairs.
Okay.
And all of our literature that had been given to them,
Right.
they shoved into the closet.
There's a bunch of books in there. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, it's not the books, there's some,
There's boxes of stuff that look like old documents.
yeah, and I need access to some of that.
Okay.
They apparently just, oh, this is climbing stuff, they just
Yeah.
put it in the
All right.
equipment closet.
There's a bunch of old guidebooks,
Yeah,
you know,
so
a bunch
you'll
of
touch
Carter
base
Rock
with me when
guidebooks.
you're gonna pull the closet apart,
Okay,
maybe I'll
I'll
find
save it.
what I'm looking for.
Okay. You're looking for something particular?
Yes,
What are you looking for?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
Remember the video of the log falling we were just talking about?
I'm sorry?
The belay test?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Original
And the
reel
last
to
one
reel.
is, is there any other stuff, like, for example, do we need to rotate any crampons?
Like they're getting old, you mean?
Yeah, or that they just never get some, because there's like a pair of foot fangs nobody ever used.
They are
I
still-
used those about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like,
They're still in pristine condition.
I thought they were gone.
No, it's still.
Oh, my God, okay.
They were
And I don't know about, and I thought the,
You know, I gave a friend of mine a pair of the foot fangs to use, you know, for top roping, and he's still a friend, so.
okay,
Mark, we do have that, one 3-person tent.
Yeah.
That could use some help. The windows busted out and.
Yeah, we
That's
got some,
right.
we got some
That should
tent
be done.
repairs that we need to do, so I'm not sure how to go about that.
okay, I thought, did we not check
Couple of
with the
year
manufacturer on that about the tent repairs?
I don't think so
Gotta
because
find me a
we just have to
seamstress
take it and
I could
use
drop
it,
them off at.
so.
Well, it's always the privilege of the new Gearmeister to get to investigate the status of whatever was left behind.
Yeah, well, I think if I can,
And-
it wouldn't take that long, a couple hours. I'd
Yeah.
probably go take everything out, put it in piles.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of miscellaneous boxes of like paper plates and cups, and
Uh-huh.
you know, we could probably consolidate 3 of those and figure out what's in there.
All right.
So,
Work day for the gear closet.
If I can have a minute,
Sure.
while Carol's here.
Uh-huh.
At the risk of stepping on a landmine, the postcard that just got handed out, I don't have my reading glasses, but I assume this says in relation
From
to
me.
Harper's Ferry.
Yes, so this is from
What-
Atlantic Climbers.
Yeah, I know.
Mhm.
These postcards should be burned, torn up. What Mid-Atlantic Climbers has done, and I'm not gonna go too far down this rabbit hole,
Mhm.
is a serious disservice to the climbing community. All this information is absolutely wrong. I've had several meetings with the superintendent at the park. They're very amicable. Harper's Ferry has not been closed. It is not closed. And
For
at the
climbing,
time-
for the
to
climbing.
It is not closed to climbing. It was not closed to climbing when Max sent out their please everybody email the park about it. You could click on the park website that very same day and it listed the areas in Virginia and at Balcony, and Balcony Junior, and the Elk Ridge Boulders. And very specifically said, these are all open. And we have a temporary closure at some of the areas in Maryland because of the landslide. This is a bunch of crap, and it is causing serious problems for the climbing community and the National Park Service in Harper's Ferry. We're trying to fix it. I'm working on it. The president of PATC, not Mountaineering Section PATC, but the
You should-
president, he's working on it. Mark's been involved. American Alpine Club has been involved. Mac is screwing stuff up.
Hmm.
Please do not respond to this.
You need to talk to them then, because
Yeah.
they're,
We
They-
have,
We are trying.
American Alpine
We
Club,
are trying.
including at the national level, has gotten in touch with the Access Fund about this.
Mhm.
I don't know what Mac's problem is, but again,
they're
like I
probably
said,
just,
all-
they probably,
no, it's not a matter of misinformation.
So I'm,
You could
this
go
is,
to the
it's an
Harper's Ferry website, they
I-
didn't
and I-
contact Harper's Ferry.
And I'm looking, by the way, I'm looking at the Harper's Ferry website right now,
yeah.
at the moment. And it says
Fascinating.
the following areas remain closed: Maryland Heights, Skink Rock, Bug Valley. All other climbing areas have reopened and are as follows: Elk Ridge, Balcony, Balcony Junior, Tiers, Pit, Highlands, Outlying Area, Underground Railroad, Overhang, and Land of the First Light.
And that was the webpage that was there when this went out on March 1st from Mac.
Hmm.
And Mac had been no contact. But I got a phone call from the superintendent saying, what the hell is going on here? This is just completely bad information, and it may result in what they're talking about, and that is having the park closed to climate.
Did you reach out to Chris Irvin or Edwin
Yes,
to talk about it?
yes. Dave Giacomo, chairman of the American Alpine Club DC, has been in contact with Chris.
Uh-huh,
Chris was supposed to get in contact with me, he hasn't.
okay.
So.
Yeah. I'll talk
Please.
to Edwin. I'll talk to Edwin tomorrow or later tonight, see what she has to say.
He was supposed to call me, so if you are in contact with him, please ask him to get in touch with me. I have another meeting with the superintendent on Friday.
Okay,
Yeah, because I talked to him recently, he was under a completely different impression.
right.
And his response to the American Alpine Club when they contacted Mac was not complimentary. And was not productive.
Okay.
I don't know what the issue with Mac is, but they are way, way off base.
Just communication issue.
We've been sending
They're
out
under a
and sending
completely
out
different
information like that since, yeah.
Talk to him.
How do you not go and look at the Harper's Ferry website, which, you got shared? And the day they sent out the email saying Harper's Ferry is closed to climbing, when the Harper's Ferry website's got all that information on it. If that's misinformation, it's just laziness on their
So-
part.
When Mark was reading the website, he was saying these areas are still closed, these have reopened, so areas had been temporarily closed for.
There was a landslide
Okay,
up there that actually closed the highway that runs along. the
okay,
base.
so it's,
I'm sorry, I could read you the whole thing projected if we had, but it just says that
right,
Maryland Heights was closed to all rock climbing and bouldering due to a landslide in this area of Harper's Ferry National Park.
yeah, I was just trying to think like how Matt could jump from that to, they don't want any climbers ever.
That-
But-
Yes, you're exactly right. And they put it on
So
the
it's
Mac
knee-jerk.
webpage.
Okay.
It's been shared and shared again.
Yeah.
This is just out there all over the place.
Mhm.
It's very counterproductive to normalizing things with the park.
So
Right.
they probably didn't check recently, because I remember when it was first closed, which was sometime last summer, and there was basically no climbing in Harper's Ferry, and there was no mention of a landslide or any of that.
It's
Because
just
it
like
happened
a-
or in the late fall, because it happened about 2 weeks after I was climbing out there. And I was like, that's weird, because I went to the ranger station to sign in, and they were all like, yay, go climb. And I'm like, so maybe.
But that I think is truly miscommunication, because the Maryland Heights, the big, the sign wall, was not closed to climbing, but registration was required starting in, I think, 1965. It was not a Park Service action, it was an act of Congress, a special act of Congress addressing access to Maryland Heights. Park Service had no problem, but all they did was require that you sign in at the ranger station. End of sentence.
Mhm.
And no other area other than Maryland Heights was affected by any of those closures.
There was a message on the website that said basically everything in Harper's Ferry was closed.
I know.
Right, so this might be a a campaign they had been working on since that time, but they haven't updated their information based on the actual situation
I think you're being
currently.
generous.
See how
Okay.
Okay, that's an
I'm
access
done.
issue, thank you. Any other new business? If not, we're all good. Thanks for coming. Hope you
We're
enjoyed tonight's
done?
program.
Wow. It's now at 9 o'clock, it's done.
He left.
Uh-huh.
That's right. Good to see you. Hello.
Alright. Go home and watch the game.
I'll be at the,
Sometimes you are be climbing a lot.
Have you been getting out much? What? You get out much lately?
I mean, hasn't been good when I've had a chance to climb. Really, but it's been good at other times.
Any interest in getting out Saturday?
I don't know.
Gonna be clear weather, 50 degrees.
Yeah, I haven't looked.
I have.
Oh.
You noted the pause in there, right?
Like my wife did.
Right. Oh wait, you're going to go back here.
I know.
That's still amazing.
Do we need to prep anything for the news?
So, I'm better than a